Hey, thank you for checking out the DDT Method podcast. My name is Drew Donaldson, and today I get to sit down and speak with somebody who has truly done it all in the fitness industry. I'm speaking with competitive natural bodybuilder, former head guy at bodybuilding.com, yes, thebodybuilding.com, a titan in the sports nutrition and supplement industries, a trainer, a coach, a biohacker, an experimenter, somebody at the forefront of all the new developments in longevity and health technology. This is none other than Kris Gethin. This is a phenomenal discussion in which we dive into several different modalities on the technology end, on the supplement end, on the peptide end of things. We really get into everything human optimization and enhancement, and we do it with one of the absolute best to ever be in the industry in an authority position. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the DDT Method podcast with Kris Gethin. Hey guys, really quick, if you want more information like the in-depth stuff that I can't necessarily talk about too much on YouTube, on Instagram, on general social media, check out the DDT Method School Group. I've developed the DDT Method School Group in order to bring you guys the information that gets censored across all other platforms. If you want in-depth breakdowns of peptides and PEDs, if you want specific protocols with dosing schedules, yes, I will tell you the milligrams. If you want information on reconstituting peptides, alternative PEDs, how to train with specific peptides and PEDs, how to eat with specific peptides and PEDs, and all things in between, including interactive Q&As and the ability to put out information that you want to learn about that I can see directly, respond to, and make video content on. Check out the school group. We have a really low cost of entry, and we really want to turn this into one of the most extensive and informative school groups on the planet. Now, the pricing is super low right now because I'm putting in a ton of content every week. We're doing 2 weekly content drops, and until that builds to a massively impressive level, I'm keeping the cost of entry incredibly low so you guys can contribute to the discussion and give me ideas and tell me what you want to see so I can keep cranking out the content. Now, the price isn't going to be super low forever because eventually I will have hundreds upon hundreds of videos in there. And again, I'm doing 2 content drops per week. That's not 2 pieces of content. That's 2 days per week at least where I'm dropping several new pieces of content and interacting with you guys almost every day as well. If you want in-depth information, check out the DDT Method School Group. All right, guys, welcome back to the DDT Method podcast. This week, I'm sitting down with somebody that, and this is something that a lot of people say about a lot of people, but this really holds true in this regard, somebody that has pretty much done it all in the fitness, nutrition, and biohacking industry. I'm here today with Kris Gethin, and Kris has been literally all over the industry we call longevity, all over the industry we call fitness, all over every facet of all of this. He's a champion natural bodybuilder. He was the man behind bodybuilding.com for a long time, and now he's in the world of performance enhancement through the biohacking and longevity lens. But this guy has literally mastered almost every corner of this industry that we're all trying to constantly learn about in order to improve not only our careers and not only the work that we might do with clients, those of us that do the coaching, but just optimizing ourselves in every single way humanly imaginable. So before we get into human optimization from all angles today, Kris, thank you so much for being here. Can you give us a little bit of background on what got you into all this and how you and your focuses have really evolved over the years?
Sure. Thank you very much for having me on, Drew. Really, really appreciate the time here. So yeah, from Wales originally. I grew up on a farm, but racing motocross from the age of like 6 years old up until like 19. So that consumed my life. You know, my identity was motocross and adrenaline. And when I had to retire, just through so many injuries in the end, it was mostly a back injury that put an end to that. You know, I lost my purpose, didn't know what my identity was, turned to drugs and alcohol for about 4 or 5 years, had a real good time partying, just full on. And, you know, I knew that this wasn't my means to the end. You know, there was something missing. And when I had help through resistance training, physiotherapy for the alleviation of pain in my back, I was alleviated of the depression that was associated with it and decided this is what I wanted to kind of study a little bit more. And when I went to college and studied international health and sports therapy for 3 years, I realized this was content that I could actually retain, unlike school, which I hated. I didn't want to be in school, just wanted to be on my motorbike. And so I started resistance training and decided, hey, let's give this bodybuilding stuff a go. I looked in this newspaper called Muscle News back then and found there was a bodybuilding show in Wales. gave myself basically just over a year to get ready for that show, not knowing there was such a thing as tested and untested shows. This was an untested show, but I went in completely natural, and I managed to get third place in that show. And I got really, really lean. I was definitely the smallest, but got really lean and decided, okay, I kind of like this. This is something that I wanted to pursue. I wasn't too gung-ho into competing, but I was gung-ho into actually having a purpose and a sense of accountability where I had to be transparent on stage, basically. So that gave me focused, and that's what I needed, something to focus and evolve upon. And then with that, I become a personal trainer. Started traveling to different countries, had my own gym in Australia. I decided I wanted to reach out to more people, so I started writing for publications, got a contract with Weeder Publications for several years, which took me to LA. So I was in kind of like the Mecca in the early 2000s. And then that got the attention of Ryan DeLuca, who's the founder of bodybuilding.com, which got me the editor-in-chief position here in Boise, where I reside now. And then after, BBCom kind of become fragmented. I left a little bit before then when Ryan decided to leave, and got into the supplement space. So I've had several supplement companies. The one that I have now is Unmatched. So I am a vendor still with bodybuilding.com and several other online platforms as well as brick and mortar. And then continue to write books. I spent a lot of time working with celebrities in India and opened a gym franchise there about 8 years ago, close to 8 years ago now, which is still going there. So I am kind of fragmented in what I do, but they all kind of cross-pollinate. But I stopped bodybuilding after about 10 years, got into more like endurance, so hybrid athleticism, Ironman triathlon, ultramarathons, Spartan, things like that. I like to, kind of dabble my feet in the various areas, but my foot will always be, well, my pivotal foot will always be in the gym. I love how it makes me feel. And obviously that is a direct correlation to our longevity as well, from bone health, from metabolic flexibility, etc. And like the biohacking aspect came in around 2014, 2015, when I got diagnosed with mold toxicity, which took me to Oldsmar, Florida for several months, where I was at Dr. Spinaug's clinic there trying to get cleared of all this mold that I had in my system. So that kind of took me down that rabbit hole. So injury got me into weight training, and then mold toxicity got me into the longevity sector.
Now, as you branched into that longevity side, that, I believe, was the catalyst for you becoming one of the most respected experts in the world of longevity as far as peptides and all the new just developments that we have in that world. Now, a lot of people watching this are going to be, well, I don't want to say a lot of people watching this. A lot of the people that are newer to this side of the industry that might be watching this might have some confusion. There might be like a question mark above their head right now, because it's like, well, wait a minute, this guy you mentioned was a champion natural bodybuilder. He just mentioned competing naturally, even in a non-drug tested show. And anybody looking up your accolades can see everything that you've done in that world. But now it's all this information on peptides and small molecules and whatnot. What was it? Now, you and I know, but the person watching might not understand. What was it that made you say, these drugs are okay, but I didn't want to do drugs at this point in time? Because I think that line is blurrier than we might think for people just getting into this.
Yeah, for sure. So it's very blurry, much like the gray area of like peptides in itself. Some are legal, some are FDA approved, some aren't. So after I did that first show, I then moved to Australia not long after, and I actually attended my first natural bodybuilding show, which really blew me away. I couldn't believe these guys were natural. Impossible. There's a guy called Mark Costanti that was guest posing there, but he later became my training partner, and I just realized, okay, there's a much higher ceiling here than what I'm giving myself value for. There's a lot of growth here. And I just remained completely natural. And then it was only I finished bodybuilding in 2009. But it is in 2017 I got introduced to peptides. Your typical Wolverine stack, your GHK, your BBC, etc. Because I was competing in an Ironman triathlon, but my shoulder was so bad that I'd torn. I did downhill mountain biking as well, racing. I still like extreme sports. And I had two choices: either stop and get the surgery, and I was halfway through a video series, or try these peptides, this Wolverine stack, to see if it'll get me through the Ironmans, until I did have to have surgery because I needed an anchor to, strap it down. And it was miraculous. It was absolutely amazing. I was doing open water swimming, and I was like swimming in a curve before because of my shoulder, but I didn't have a black line to follow. Once I had that, did the Wolverine stack, I was absolutely fine again. And I did it with very little discomfort. So that's what got me sold into peptides. Now, I understand in natural federations it is banned, but at the end of the day, these are just signal molecules. They're not like a synthetic override like your TRT or HGH. It is a signal for what your body is supposed to be producing, whether it be for repair, longevity, your telomeres, your skin, etc. And that's what I really, really like about it. There is a blurring in that line, but all it does is signal what your body should be producing anyway. These sequences of amino acids that are like peptide bonded with dipeptides, tripeptides, etc., which I think is absolutely phenomenal. So, of course, I have a lot of clients, as you do, that come and they just want health and they want a better way of living. Now, it's going to be hard for some people to get over the thought of, yes, I've got to get an insulin-sized needle and I've got to inject myself now because surely that's illegal. But we know that, since I think 1902 or 1908, people have been injecting themselves with insulin, which is a peptide in itself. So these are just different peptide molecules based on, that human condition that we need to repair.
Hey guys, I'm going to interrupt myself really quickly here for a second to touch on Real Primal Human. If you've ever wanted to work with me in a coaching capacity, you may have seen that I've recently closed my books for one-on-one coaching on DDT method, but I've done so in order to be able to dedicate my time to launching Real Primal Human. Real Primal Human is my coaching platform where I've established a team of some of the best coaches and biohacking experts in the world to bring you guys the best coaching that's optimized for you, for your goals, to cut out all the BS and give you everything that you need, from training information to nutrition information to PEDs, performance enhancement from a peptide level and an optimization level hormonally, to get you where you want to be in the best way possible and to do it safely, accurately, scientifically, and most importantly, one-on-one and catered to you. If you're interested in coaching through the Real Primal Human system, click the link below. So now that you've entered this world, obviously it's become something that you've become immensely educated in, and you know everything that's going on internally based on different peptides and different classifications. Now that your life and career has naturally shifted and your businesses have exploded, and as you mentioned, you have your hand in so many different things, what are the go-tos as far as a high-achieving individual like yourself that has a ton of like mental cognitive demand and then obviously still needs to get a lot of physicality just to feel normal because you've been a physical athlete your entire life? Like, what does your day-to-day look like in your training, in your nutrition, in your peptides? Like, not a picture perfect, here's everything I do from start to finish, but what are you focusing on right now? How are you training? How are you eating? How are you supplementing, doing everything that you're doing?
Yeah, it all works in cycles, right? So I'm not, doing a complete shotgun approach at everything. So, the one thing that I had focused on recently, because I noticed that I was kind of like wired but tired. I wasn't sleeping as well as I could have been, but I would wake up with like a little bit of anxiety, but I'd have a little bit of issues sleeping at night. So I figured, okay, I probably need to reset myself, my central nervous system. So I did like the trifecta of like the Pinealon, the Thymolin, and the Epitalon, because I am trying to reverse my biological age at the same time and kind of reset myself. So I'll do that for like a 10 to 14 day reset. And I'll usually do that with like a mitochondrial uncoupler. So like the SS31 and MOTS-C. And then add maybe some Leuco blue, which is like an extra hydrogen to the methylene blue. So it's like even more stronger, pre-digested. So, that's kind of the peptide phase that I've been going through recently. I don't have any injuries. I'm not trying to burn fat or build muscle or any of those things. It's more so internal. I have relied on like the J147 and a dihexa in the past, but now I feel that because I've reset myself, I have good cognitive flow. I have good night's sleep. I'm getting the right light at the right time. So like the blue light, because it's, the red light, the red frequencies in the morning now, because it's like wintertime here in Boise, Idaho. So now I rely on my biohacks a little bit more than I generally would. I try to go towards our ancestral tenets. So wake up in the morning, get the sunrise, earth, ground myself. It's a little bit cold, it's a little bit darker, so I'll use like earthing trainers or earthing mats, and I'll use the red light panels that I've got in the house. That's usually like the first thing in the morning to set my my circadian setting. Then it's the typical ice bath. You know, I've been doing ice baths for many, many years. Contrast therapy we learned about in college in the mid-90s. So I'm a big fan of that because it really helps with my mental stability more than anything. I'm not as reactive. I'm not as much of an arsehole to be around if I get that ice bath in the morning. And sometimes I'll do the sauna, sometimes not. You know, a lot of the time I will. Just to collate, you know, a lot of the heavy metals or pollutants. Is, you know, if I've been away on a lot of travel, I will do that. But usually it's those sort of things in a movement, and then in the morning, and then start after that with some movement. You know, get the blood flow to the brain. So you know, I'm on my treadmill desk at the moment. It's great for the synovial fluid to my joints, the blood flow to the brain. So I'm a little bit more cognitively enhanced because I have to be very productive throughout the day. I work from home for the most part. And then when it comes to food, I'm instinctive. So I haven't eaten yet. Maybe I won't eat until, I don't know, midday, maybe after my workout. Sometimes I'll get my 6 meals in, the typical bodybuilder bro meal split. Sometimes I'll only get a couple of meals in. You know, it depends. Like I've got that Dr. Volta Longo's Prolong kit being sent to me sometime this week. So I may do like a 5-day fasting mimicking diet next week. But a lot of it is instinctive. The only thing that really doesn't change is like my weight training split, and that's usually like 5 days a week. I'll do some form of cardio on a daily basis because I love cardio. That could be swimming, biking, riding my bike, mountain biking, etc. And that typical split will only change in the realms of, say, if I go to the gym, I'm not really feeling that strong, I'm feeling a little bit tight, then maybe I'm swapping the free weights for machines and cables. Maybe I'll increase the intensity by doing circuits with very little rest after those circuits. So let's say I do 5 exercises for biceps back to back. Luckily, I go to a gym that's pretty quiet, so I can do that. And then I'll have my rest and then do it again because I don't want to put too much strain on my joints, but I want to create trauma through the intensity. And that keeps me kind of injury free because, you know, I've probably had more injuries than any one of my clients over the years, you know, from stupid stuff outside of the gym as opposed to inside of the gym. And then, you know, in the afternoon, I'm making sure that I'm drinking, you know, a good gallon of water throughout the day. You know, if I am fasting, I'm doing what's called a controlled fast. So I'm having my essential amino acids, not BCAAs, because the leucine content can be a little bit high. So I'll have my essential amino acids, my glutamine, my electrolytes, usually during my fasting period. So it isn't like a pure fast. It's a little bit more like a fasting mimicking protocol. And, you know, I've got a PEMF mat. I'll usually lie on that if, you know, I have time in the evening, you know, because I kind of like to stack my biohacks. And I've got my compression. Maybe I'm lying on there with my compression. Maybe I'm lying on there with my hydrogen mask. I love hydrogen. I'm a huge fan of hydrogen. I have the hydrogen soak. I have the hydrogen in my ice bath. I breathe the hydrogen. I have the tablets. You know, I'm a huge fan of that. And I find that gives me cognitive enhancement as well. So I go quite high on antioxidants, whether it comes from like a My Vital C, which is a carbon C60. You know, I have the glutathione. I have, like I said, the hydrogen. So I find, you know, especially through the oxidative stress that we go through, especially as we get a little bit older and the more active we are, we need to go a little bit higher on the various forms of antioxidants with their hormetic or non-hormetic. So it's kind of like what the day looks like up until about bedtime, which is 7:30 to 8 o'clock for me. So that's when I'm kind of wearing, you know, like the blue light blocking glasses. I'm staying away from any electrical device. I like to bookend my day without them. And, you know, I'll just read a book for like 45 minutes. And that gets me to escape all the deadlines, all the calls, all the things that I have to remember throughout the day or for the following day, and kind of escape that reality, go into another reality. You know, I'm not reading like a book on entrepreneurship. I'm reading like a detective novel or something like that. And that just really helps me out. And then, you know, whatever I do today kind of dictates my tomorrow.
I love every aspect of everything that you just said because it just mirrors a lot of the stuff that I preach to clients about a a concept that I call the Jedi mastery of biohacking and longevity. And by that, I mean, if you learn how everything works from the tech end of things to the supplemental side to basics of diet and training, you reach this point where you're so in tune with your body, and likewise, you know exactly what's going on with all of these tools and all of these gadgets and all of these supplements that we have, that you can go on instinct and you can cater each day to the demands of the day. A couple very profound things that you said that you were mentioning just casually, but I just think they're so incredibly intelligent for what we do that sometimes they get kind of just lost in the over-encompassing, like, oh, wow, this is all the stuff that he's doing. But just little things there, like, and then most of these modalities from the PEMF, I have my PEMF mat over there. I have my bottles of carbon 60 there. I don't have a hydrogen breathing machine, but I have a Carbogen CO2 infused breathing device right next to me here. I stack them all. I use them at different times. But again, just kind of like just zipping back to one thing that you said in passing was you're utilizing these tools based on the day, based on the time of year, based on the demands. So if it's summer, if there's a lot of sunlight, we want to get out, we want to get that sunlight automatically. And that's not to say we're not going to use red light panels that day whatsoever, but when we don't have access to that sunlight, we have the red light panel to make up for that. When we don't have the chance to get out and put our feet in the dirt, something like a grounding mat, which I have underneath my desk here, is completely applicable, and even better if you don't have the chance to go outside. Even to when you wear your blue light blocking glasses. I've got my yellows on because I've been in front of my computer screen for 4 hours already today. If that wasn't the case, I probably wouldn't be wearing them. If it were 4 hours from now, I'd probably have my red blue light glasses on. So it's just one of those things where once you realize all of this stuff is applicable in different situations, how it works, how these things work together, then you reach that quote unquote Jedi mastery level where you're going on instinct and you just know exactly what to implement when and where and how. Now, backing up again to the peptides, you had mentioned SS31 and MOTS, phenomenal products for just kind of cellular integrity, from binding to cardiolipin, strengthening the cell, to making the entire environment it works in just more efficient. The others that you mentioned, not a lot of people talk about, at least not on the podcast, on this podcast thus far. So particularly Pinealon and Epitalon, which work on the pineal gland. Can you explain to me what the hell the pineal gland actually does so everybody can get a better understanding of it and why we want to optimize it for longevity?
Yeah, for sure. So, what I've noticed is that, a lot of people just have a lot of confusion around that. And I did in the beginning. And sometimes, dependent on who you talk to, there's a lot of confusion still. But this is what I've noticed with myself, especially and with clients who are either athletes or high dopamine driven people. Usually these are the people that you have to try to get them to do less as opposed to more. The mainstream population, usually that you're trying to encourage them. Okay, you need to exercise more, need to eat more meals, eat cleaner, etc. Then you have the athletes or, the high profile CEO that thinks more is better. They're going to work out 6-7 times a week, 6-7 times a week. They're not sleeping well. They want to get more done, and they are just overachievers. And these people are usually very sympathetic, dopamine dominant people. And what I find with these people is that they are wired and tired. Like I said, you look at their heart rate variability. You'll look at their, let's say, their inflammatory markers, maybe their cortisol, and it's sky high. Their HRV is tanked, but they're still go, 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 because they're just so driven and they're not realizing the markers that are telling them to kind of slow down. And these people generally are kind of wired, but they're very tired, much like myself was going through this phase now just about 3 weeks ago. And they just can't understand why they can't sleep. And they're really tired, but they go to bed and they're tossing and turning and wake up several times in the night. And then, they wake up in the morning, they have the energy, but by the time they go to bed, they're just completely whacked out, but now they can't sleep. And it's just a vicious cycle. And a lot of the time I feel that their adrenal glands or their central nervous system needs a really good reset. And the pineal gland generally helps do that. So that's why I'll usually integrate that in with, like I said, to make sure that the immune system is kind of enhanced as well. So we throw in the thymolin, and then the Epitalon is usually in there as well. It just kind of enhances its effect. And especially if that person's not sleeping, the chances are their telomeres are kind of shortening as well if they're under stress. They feel that stress is a good thing and they become addicted to it. So that's kind of why I kind of throw those things in there. And usually after we've done that for, say, a 2-week period, then everything seems to quiet itself down. Like I said, we, throwing in those, mitochondrial uncouplers or something that enhances the mitochondria as well, with the leucoblue, with the hydrogen. I find that when you do the hydrogen and the leucoblue, maybe you're putting something in there as well that's helping to be brain protective as well, maybe creatine in that concoction in the morning. Doing so, they don't need as much when you actually have the hydrogen in there. The hydrogen seems to enhance the bioavailability somewhat. So that, you can overdo the methylene blue. So I'll usually have, like I said, a leucoblue, which is a little more concentrated. It's got that extra electron on it, so the bioavailability is a little bit higher. So everything's dosed a little bit smaller at that time. Much like if you've got a MOTS-C by itself, maybe it's going to be a little bit higher. Maybe if you have an SS31, it's going to be a little bit higher. If you're stacking both together, maybe you can come a little bit lower.
Now, tell me a little bit more about hydrogen therapies, because I've been using hydrogen water forever, and that's something I always notice a big difference in my general recovery with. But you're mentioning breathing hydrogen, you're mentioning hydrogen in different facets and different applications. What is it that hydrogen's doing, and what are all the ways that you use it?
Yeah, so like I said, I'll kind of soak in it. If I've just had a long run, maybe I'm putting the hydrogen in my bath now, on a leg day or something like that. And this is a non-hermetic antioxidant, so you can take it around your workout. So that's why, after a leg workout, I'm not necessarily getting in the ice bath straight away, but I am going to get in a bath and I'm going to use hydrogen to help with that, enhance that recovery, because the molecule is so small, it can become subcutaneous. It can go through the skin barrier quite easily, especially if you're in a warm bath where your pores are open, as opposed to an ice bath. With the inhalation, this is what I found. It creates, and this is quite confusing to explain, it creates a calming but very focused calm in the brain. This is what I find. So I tried it for the very first time at an expo. Think of it, it's noisy, there's sound, there's lights, there's people. And when I did this, Alex Taverna and Tyler LeBaron, who are a couple of the brains behind hydrogen, I was reading Alex's new book that he just handed me. I was only on the hydrogen inhalation machine for maybe 5 minutes, and I was like, I have to put this book down. I just feel kind of very, very sleepy and calm. So I had my eyes closed there in this noisy expo for about 25 minutes, knowing where I was, but felt that I was in a deep meditative state, not quite falling asleep, but almost on that edge. And then when I was awoken and I had to be on stage, immediately after, I thought, oh my God, I'm just not going to be on it now. I'm going to be way too tired and sleepy to, be able to feel this fireside chat. But I was really enhanced at that time. I felt clear, like a wind tunnel had been through the brain and just cleared out all the fog. So I found that breathing in this antioxidant just creates so much brain clarity. And there's a lot of studies that's coming out to show that it's great for the kidneys, it's great for the lungs. There's so many more studies that is researched, and Alex Taverna is put in a lot of momentum behind that I just think there's so many modalities with hydrogen that we don't really understand or aren't fully aware of, but you can kind of feel it. You feel your body's enhanced recovery. You feel that, everything is just clearer and cleaner. And I think when you start putting your body through extreme conditions and then you start supplementing, whether it be, the tablets or breathing or whatever, you actually feel the enhancement from it so much more. I don't know if this has anything to do with it, but it is supposed to help with your immune system. So your body's ability to recover, T-cell immunity. So I just never get sick. So whenever I get on a flight, and I took over 40 flights in the first quarter of this year, I will always have my hydrogen tablets before I take off, when I land, just to ensure that I'm getting plenty of, immediate antioxidant replenishment. And so far, touch wood, it's been really, really good.
So what are some of the other antioxidant interventions that you like to use? I know you mentioned C60, but maybe a better way to approach that, because there still is a massive misunderstanding of it. What exactly are antioxidants in general doing? Why do we need them? And there's so many different types. How do we choose what to use and when?
Yeah, good question. That is a little bit more of a shotgun approach, because you have different antioxidants working in different means and work, again, somewhat in synergy with each other. So, I will take, a product called, I'm not sponsored by these companies, but Cell Shield, which has your citria glutathione. It will have resveratrol. It will have your liposomal vitamin C and curcumin and whatnot. So I like to take that because it kind of works in synergy with each other. Like I said, the C60, ESS60 is like the human grade version of that C60 that I like to take. I'll have the coconut carrier in my coffee, and I'll have the olive oil just kind of by itself. And I think that was supposed to be like 47 times more powerful as an antioxidant over like vitamin C. Don't quote me, but I know it's up there.
It stays in the system, yeah. So C60 being a unique molecule just kind of accumulates and collects. The difference is somewhere in the actual structure.
Yeah. So it's very stable in fat, in the fat cell. Hence why it comes in a fat carrier. So dependent on where you are, and you mentioned this earlier. If I'm at home, I'm not going to do the biohacks as much as I would when I'm traveling. As much like the dependence on the time of the year as well. Now, when I'm traveling, I'm going to take that C60 or the glutathione or the hydrogen, like usually a couple of times a day, because now I've got more pollutants. Sometimes you deal with noise pollutants. If I'm in Mumbai, for instance, everybody's hitting their horn. You've got a lot of EMFs. You've got a lot of Wi-Fi. You've got a lot of the pollutants in the air from all the fumes. And generally, you're just not sleeping as much because I'm staying in a hotel, getting penetrated with more Wi-Fi, etc. So I'll go very high on the antioxidants to kind of beat down a lot of reactive oxygen species that we're going to be producing in the body. Now, we think, of course, well, if you're healthy, maybe you're not going to produce as much. Well, usually we're oxidating more stress on our bodies because now we're training in a gym. We've got the artificial blue light in the low ceilings, and being just active, we're oxidizing a lot more. So we're going through a lot more vitamins, minerals, antioxidants. So usually we need to supplement a lot more because we're not going to get it through our food, especially when you're in a country that deals with a lot of overpopulation, i.e. India, and overharvestation. So the minerals are depleted, the antioxidants are depleted from the food that we're consuming. I think they say, like our great-grandparents would eat one orange to the comparison of us eating 7 oranges today to get the same amount of vitamin C. Can you believe it? So people who say you don't have to supplement, well, we're living in a different environment to our ancestors. So we have to supplement to a certain degree, especially if an active individual. And as you're getting a little bit older, your body's ability to assimilate becomes lessened. You think about it with food, our HCl declines in our gut, so we're not able to break down as much as we once did. Hence why people, as they get a little bit older, I'm generalizing, would have red meat before bed and they just cannot go to sleep because they're not breaking it down as they once did. So I just think that we have to supplement and change our diet accordingly as we do get a little bit older. I used to live off red meats. Now I prefer fish. It's easier for my body to break down now.
Now, supplements need to be approached as supplements, and that's something that I feel like a lot of people still miss the boat on, despite the fact that it's literally in the name. It's to supplement everything else that you're doing. And like we talked about before, really all of these things, from biohacks to technology to nutritional supplements to peptides, PEDs, need to be placed in the right environment to do their thing. Supplements in the supplement industry, it's gone from the Wild West to somewhat kind of maybe regulated, depending on your definition of the term regulated, to a time where we were able to get literal drugs at GNC, to a time where we couldn't really get our hands on anything and people just thought everything was BS. So as somebody that's had their hand in that industry for so long, What are some of the supplements? Maybe let's attack this from a performance angle. What are some of the tried and trues that we've always believed in that have turned out to be actually reliable and something that we should have in our performance lives as far as training, gym, cardio, etc.? And then as far as like research and development through your company Unmatched, is there anything new that's come out from that supplemental lens as far as sports nutrition?
Yeah, good question. So as we know, creatine is getting more hype again. We got a lot of hype about a year ago, and then about, I think 3 weeks ago, something popped up because it went viral again. Like our creatine sales on Amazon just went through the roof, as I'm sure every other company probably did as well at the same time. So creatine is a huge one. We know that it helps with ATP, but ATP is in trillions of cells in our body, especially in the brain. So we know that it is very much brain protective, and it actually helps prevent bone loss. So it's great for bone density, and we know that's a precursor to longevity. I do like the combination of creatine with guanidinoacidic acid, which is a precursor to creatine because it gets absorbed into the cell through the taurine pathway, the GABA pathway, the diffusion. So it gets absorbed into the cell through 4 different pathways as opposed to the one with monohydrate. Not that there's anything wrong with monohydrate, but we're always trying to advance with more bioavailability, and it does cross the blood-brain barrier more efficiently as well. So creatine, or cregatine is what we call it as well, is probably up there. And then vitamin D. I've noticed a lot of people seem to have a deficiency in vitamin D. My mother was one of those people that she just wasn't feeling herself. She was very reactive, short-tempered, just didn't think as clear as she once could have, and we didn't really know what was wrong with her. And then she started, we realized that her vitamin D levels were low, started supplementing with vitamin D, like 15,000 IU to begin with, tapered it down to 10,000, then 8,000, completely changed her. But as we know, vitamin D is more like a hormone than it is a vitamin. It is a precursor to testosterone as well. And then magnesium, as we know, we are deficient in magnesium, especially here in the US. So supplementing with magnesium, I think, is great, not only just as a longevity supplement, but for performance. It helps with the muscles to relax and contract. The mineral, as you're going to find in electrolytes, for instance, is an essential one. So I'd say those are probably the essentials, but again, it all depends on that individual. Now we know that loads of people are on GLPs, so a lot of these people are deficient in protein, but they don't feel like eating protein. So maybe they have to supplement with them or essential amino acids to prevent with a lot of this muscle loss so they can remain metabolically active at the same time. So, there's a lot of supplements out there on the market that have benefit, but if you were to take all of them, you'd probably have health implications. So you have to be smart about what you're taking. So I always say test and not guess. But when it comes to what we're doing with Unmatched, we're just trying to continue to bring that longevity sector with the sports performance sector, making sure that we are prioritizing the gut health, because that's where our immune system is grown or optimized. That's where our testosterone or our hormones are optimized. So making sure that we're not having like artificial sweeteners and artificial crap in there, so to speak. And I'm very, very conscious of trying to get my clients, especially again in the US, to remove caffeine as much as possible from their diet, because there's a huge overconsumption of caffeine here, which again, I believe is why so many people need something like Pinealon, because they're over accentuating the adrenal stress that they're dealing with. Cortisol is going up, prolactin levels possibly going up, and especially around a workout, it can cause a diuretic effect. It can raise cortisol. It can increase blood constriction as opposed to vasodilation, which we need around a workout. We want the pump. We want to be hydrated. Our cortisol levels are going to be up during the workout anyway, so we need to kind of manage that and try to stay in a parasympathetic state the rest of the time. So I prefer people either go non-stim or use like paraxanthine, which is that metabolite of caffeine that doesn't have any of the negatives. Like even this, again, I'm not sponsored by these guys, but this energy drink, it's naturally sweetened and it has paraxanthine. So I'm not getting any of those cortisol effects, but I'm having the reactive time. I'm having the brain cognition, the clarity, the nootropic effect from that. And it kind of kills some cravings at the same time.
I feel like in a lot of cases, there's a habitual addiction to popping the top on an energy drink or having a morning coffee, that if we can just find something that might be more nootropic based in nature and less stimulating, it might be able to fill that gap more than a lot of people even realize. Now, you've touched on the parasympathetic nervous system, and that's another thing that a lot of people that you'd think would be prioritizing learning about how the brain works in relation to performance, but it's just kind of something that's being missed on a lot of people, or missed by a lot of people. What are some of your other like tips and tricks to kind of like shift towards more parasympathetic dominance? Because for anybody that might not know, we have sympathetic and parasympathetic. And for lack of time to dive into the specifics of it, sympathetic nervous system, go, 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 fight or flight, parasympathetic, rest and digest. How do you make sure that you're in a parasympathetic state, if I could talk, predominantly?
Yeah, so it basically starts off in the evening before waking up in the morning, because I always try to encourage people to put down the device, that drug, as much as possible. I'm pointed to my phone here, because you think about it, if you were to go and get, I don't know, a drug from a drug dealer, then you have to make the effort of calling that person, finding out who that person is, maybe going to pick it up, for instance. But we get this dopamine dominant fix from this phone, from Amazon, from scrolling, from email, responding to WhatsApp or whatever. There's always some sort of stimulation going on with this phone. And then the more that we stimulate the dopamine release throughout the day, it's going to expect that during the night as well. So I'm not going to fully be able to relax. Maybe people wake up at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning because the brain is going, where's my dopamine fix? I need this. So I think it starts with putting the phone down as much as possible during the day, unless it's absolutely needed. I know that a lot of our work is on there. Bookend your day. No phone first thing in the morning for an hour. No phone last thing in the evening for an hour. Stay away from electronic devices. Keep the phone away from your bedroom. You don't want any dirty electricity coming from the wall because it's plugged in. And you have a lot of trackable apps on your phone, like Find My Phone and stuff like that from Apple. So even if you do have it on airplane mode, you're still getting a signal. Now, I understand that some people are more electrosensitive to the others. I'm one of those fragile little petals. My wife isn't. She's absolutely fine. So I have to be sensitive to that fact, much like some people are allergic to peanuts and other people aren't. Doesn't mean that that allergic reaction is not there. That's one thing. And starting off in a meditative state. Now, I am one of these people that does rely on technology when it comes to meditation, because I find that guided meditation is just so much more proficient for me. So I'll use something like an Athena or like the Muse or like a Brain Tap, where I have that guided meditation. I am not distracted. I'm just focused like on the sound, on the breath. What I like about the Athena or the Muse is that you can listen to the sound of wind, of a river, of a waterfall, and that sound is at a decent volume. But if your brain starts to wander, now that volume goes up. So it alerts you straight away, hey, your brain is wandering, bring it back to center. So I like that, where if I'm wearing a brain tap and I'm just listening to a voice, my brain can still wander, and 5 minutes later, I realize that it's wandered. So I do like something like that to help start me in the day of parasympathetic dominance. And the ice bath actually helps for me. Not everybody. Some people can be overly stressed and they could just raise cortisol and their HRV can tank even more. But I do love that for me in the beginning of the day. It helps have that stability throughout the day. And I think you have to be very, very conscious when you're eating as well, making sure that you're not scrolling, that you're not talking, that you're not reading, because you are in that rest and digest state then, where you're conscious of your senses, the sense of smell, the sense of taste, the sense of sight, the texture, etc. There's a great book out there called The Slow Down Diet. And there's a lot of science and research showing that if you are conscious when you're eating, you will absorb so much more of the micronutrients and the macronutrients of that food. Much like if you're distracted in the gym and you're not focusing on that mind-muscle connection, then you're probably not going to get the growth out of that muscle as if you were focused. So those are several of the things that I do suggest. And if you are in an environment where, like you said, you're on the computer for 4 hours prior to this, you've got low ceilings in your office that has the strip lights or the harsh lighting that you are wearing, a blue light blocking glasses to manage your cortisol response to that as well, the yellow lens. So it does let in a little bit of the light, or if you're working with colors on your phone, you're a creative designer, you can get like the see-through ones as well. So I think several things like that. Some people need a full-on reset. So I've done a 10-day Vipassana silent retreat before now, because I'm like, I need to get away from everything. So in that Vipassana, 10-day retreat, you're not making eye contact, you're not talking to anybody, you don't have anything to read, you definitely don't have your phone or computer in there. You're just heightened to your own senses. And, it's probably the hardest thing that I've ever done. I've gone to Costa Rica and I've gone to Mexico and I've done the 5-MeO and the ayahuasca journey. And that, I'd say, was probably the best, but the hardest, the most profound for me, because you do have all these emotions come to the surface, your guilt and your shame, and you think about the future and worrying about the past, etc., because you've got no distraction. And we're so used to distraction. So then you have to basically face yourself and face everything. But then after, I'd say 5, 6, 7 days, you do look at everything in equanimity. If you can get to that 7th day, because a lot of people do leave after the 3rd or 4th day, but I think that is a phenomenal reset, not only just for that time, but you can take yourself back to that time, knowing how profound and how that can help you. Because, for instance, I would walk to the meditation center from our digs where we were sleeping in, for instance, and I wouldn't notice my walk there and walk back. But then like on the 4th day, 5th day, I'm noticing things that I hadn't seen. And now I'm hearing like the wind going through the grass. It was always there, but I'd never heard it before. Much like when I drove to this center, which was about a 5-hour drive from here, they have them all over the world. I didn't notice the hillside. I didn't notice the view. I didn't notice the shape of the clouds. I'm noticing all these things on the way back. And it just goes to show how present we can be if we just stop, listen, hear, see, smell, whatever. We don't generally do that because we're just so distracted.
I think people almost fear that lack of distractions because presence can be scary. And I did something very similar about 2 years ago now, when I basically disconnected for about 10 days from almost everything, which was terrifying. But the driving force to that was I realized in a conversation with my fiance that I couldn't tell you one color of one of the houses in my neighborhood other than my own, not even my direct neighbors. From memory recall, couldn't tell you. And then diving deeper into that conversation, I realized I wasn't even 100% sure the color of my own front door of the house that I own. So that was my kind of like, holy shit, I need to kind of disconnect from everything. And I've been trying to look at my schedule and think of a way where can I really disconnect and get away from everything. And we like to go out in the country or go up to Nashville or go up to the Carolinas and get really away from everything. And I kind of want to do that for an extended period of time if I can pull it off with work. Because one of the other things that we've talked about before, earlier on the podcast, as well as briefly off air, is EMFs and getting away from those as well. And this is completely different than just being present with your own mind and whatnot. This is literally escaping something that can have a profound effect on a lot of people because they don't really understand how detrimental EMFs can be for certain individuals. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how you manage stress from EMFs? I'm not sure if that's an Aries Tech necklace. If it isn't, yeah. Oh, it is. All right, good. Because I was like, I'm either going to be really observant here, or I'm going to be completely talking out of my ass. But I know that's a great mentality or modality to use against EMFs. But overall, like, what are EMFs doing? And like the Aries Tech, what are some ways that you kind of like mitigate the damage from those?
Yeah, so obviously, the non-native EMFs, EMFs are surrounding us all the time. But then you have the native and you have the non-native. The non-native is the one that's penetrating into our cell, and it can cause mitochondrial dysfunction. As I mentioned earlier, some people are going to be more sensitive to it than others. I noticed it the first time probably in like 2015, 2016, I think it was. I actually went to like a music festival in Vegas. It was in the Speedway there. No one's phone was working. leaving because there was just so many people in a tight spot. So, if you lost someone, forget it. You're not finding them. And then what are we doing after that music festival? We're going into Las Vegas and staying a night in a hotel. And I remember myself and a few other people that was in our group, like it felt like we had a hangover for like 5 days following. Even though we hadn't done drugs, we hadn't been drinking alcohol, we just felt out of it. And that's when I thought, hold on, there could be something. No one's phone was working. Some of us feel fine. Some of us aren't. Let's look into that a little bit more. Then I started, when I traveled to a lot of built up areas, whether it be LA, Mumbai or London, I started earthing and grounding more. I'd wear what's called these Bahi trainers, and they're earthing trainers, which are very comfortable because I like to run. So if I can multitask with the stuff that I pack tight in my suitcase, the better. And I got myself an EMF reader, and I held the phone and I had the EMF reader and noticed that it penetrates, it would go all the way up, the meter would go all the way up. As soon as I took my shoes and socks off or wore these Bahi trainers, that meter would go down. So I realized, okay, this stuff can penetrate through me or into me. I need to kind of get rid of it in the daytime, and in the evening. So I started earthing and grounding twice a day, morning and night. I noticed my sleep structure, it was enhanced. The quality of my sleep, my HRV started to increase. So that's when I started to kind of really take a deeper dive into it. I had Brian Hoyer come to my house here in Boise. He owns Shielded Healing. So he checked for all the dirty electricity and where the highest levels or EMF were in the house. And he actually had me sleep in what was kind of like a single man tent. It was a Faraday cage, basically. And I noticed again, my sleep increased so much more. And I did it 2 nights in a row. This can't be a placebo effect, right? Because I'm sleeping. So that's when I realized that the mitochondrial dysfunction that is possibly happening for all of us, if we're not earthing, we're not grounding, we're not protecting ourselves, is heightened. Now, we know a lot of people's testosterone is tanking. And, we've seen that some people, if they, got their phone in their pocket, it can have a negative effect. Then a friend of mine, Tim Gray, who puts on a health optimization summit, he had a couple of successful businesses, and he'd always have the phone, I think it was to the left side of his face. And his beard is all gray on the left side of his face and not so much on the right. So who knows if that is some sort of coincidence or oxidative stress. They've noticed a lot of people that have their phone in their left side of the pocket as opposed to the right. Those are more dominant, predisposed to having like hip replacements, for instance. Whether there is anything to that, I don't know, but I prefer to be safe than sorry. All I know is that since I've been able to protect myself, and like I said, I'll have like the Get Lambs or like the Lila Q, for instance, boxer shorts that have like the Faraday covering. If I'm taking a flight, then I'm wearing a lot more Faraday clothing because I'm exposed to a lot of people that have their phones, and I'm on a Wi-Fi on the plane and stuff like that. So, I do whatever I can to protect myself, to optimize my testosterone levels, my longevity, my sleep structure. And there's, of course, we can't avoid it. It's everywhere and we use it. So I try to use cables, as much as possible, as opposed to like the Bluetooth. I don't have like the iPods, for instance, yet, or anything like that. And I just try to do whatever I can to protect myself. But unfortunately, because it's invisible, we just don't take it as seriously as we possibly should. We don't know the repercussions. We just know that more people are dealing with autoimmune diseases. More people are getting diagnosed with cancer. Maybe it's not that. Maybe it's the phthalates. Maybe it's the contaminants in our food. I don't know. But, collectively, I think there's a lot we can do to kind of navigate the structure and the social norms that we've been put into.
I agree with that 1,000%. And it's one of those things where maybe if somebody doesn't have the money, don't break the bank trying to implement every modality to avoid it. But If you're successful, you have successful businesses, you have some money to spend, why not do something that in the worst case scenario might make you a little bit better in terms of performance? Best case scenario will prevent some pretty bad shit that could happen in the future. I have everything from the Lila Quantum Block. I have the necklace. I have the Aries Tech necklace. I have Faraday bags for my phone. I have a Faraday bag for my phone. It goes in a fanny pack when I go out. This is an EMF blocking beanie. So this is literally one step above an actual tinfoil hat. So I'll spend some money on it just to keep myself safe. Now, Kris, I know you have another call coming up. I want to be respectful of your time, but I'm also very purposefully going to ask you a complex question because I know you'll have to answer it quickly. Okay. Kris Gethin gets booked for this big tour. Let's say it's 60 days. You're speaking in several public venues. You need to be mentally on, and it's a fitness, longevity, health style expo tour. So you also want to be shredded. What are some of the quick changes you make supplementally and maybe with your training to be mentally on, mentally fire on all cylinders, and to be as lean and shredded as possible? The summarized version.
Okay, then I'm probably fasting. I'm going to be fasting into the time zone that I'm going into, during the evening hours. And knowing that I need to be shredded that entire time, I'm going to make sure that I am getting my protein, my essential amino acids in. So I am going to be supplementing a lot more than I usually would. And I'm going to be fasting and breaking that window with a higher protein. And maybe there's only 2 or 3 feeding opportunities, but I'll find that's got to give me mental clarity as well. I'm going to possibly rely on more ATP. So I'm going to have more creatine or creatine, and I'll stack that with some like BHB salts, because that's more ATP as well. So I really like the guanidinoacidic acid. I like the creatine, and I like the BHB. So I'd say those are the main things that I would follow. Of course, there's probably going to be a lot of biohacks added to that, but those are going to be the basics that I'm going to adhere to and make sure that I'm getting some form of movement further than my workouts, like cardiovascular exercise every single day, just to ensure that I am clearing out any toxic produce. So if I can get access to a sauna, so be it. If not, I'm just going to sweat it out with activity.
Awesome. I love that. And those are some actionables that anybody can implement towards the same goal and definitely move the needle pretty significantly. We'll have to have you on for a future episode where maybe we do the deep dive. Kris Gethin, if I'm leaving no stone unturned for this goal, this is what I'm doing and this is how I'm doing it, because I'm sure that would catch everybody's attention and their interest almost immediately. Kris, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate this so much. You're somebody in the industry that I've looked up to for a long time, and it's just awesome to hear that you're still learning, still evolving, still giving back, and you're still becoming a master of your craft after already establishing yourself as so in our industry. If anybody hasn't been exposed to your content yet, they want to deep dive in now after listening to this, where are the best places for them to find you?
Well, I've got a few businesses and a few links, so it's probably best for them to just find me on Instagram. I answer messages on there anyway. So that's Kris, Kris Gethin, Gethin.
Awesome. Kris, again, thank you so much for your time. We'll have to have you back to deep dive even further. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the DDT Method Podcast, and we will see you next week.